the Multimedia Ninja Podcast, episode 46. Hello again, and welcome to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast, where it's all about surviving and thriving in the digital convergence. My name is Bradford Rogers, and I'll be interviewing some multimedia ninjas who are making things happen in their respective fields and sharing tips, tools, and insights for multimedia artists and content creators. As always, you can find show notes at themultimedianinja.com. This week, another visit from Grammy-winning mastering engineer Michael Graves. As you may know, in this podcast series, my friends and I will be talking about all things multimedia, including creativity, shaping your ideas, and how to be more productive doing it, regardless of what kind of content you're creating. We have got an exciting episode for you today, so what do you say we just let's get to it? Hey there, welcome back to another edition of the Multimedia Ninja Podcast. I want to get right to our guest quickly, Mr. Michael Graves, but I do want to do a little housekeeping and remind you that you can subscribe to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast and find everything Multimedia Ninja at themultimedianinja.com, including, I always forget to say, some of the projects I've actually produced for myself, for Mr. Timothy P. Green, book my father put out that I edited and published, and all sorts of good stuff, as well as links to our guests, like this week's guest, Mr. Michael Graves. And encourage you to go to themultimedianinja.com and check it out. Subscribe to the podcast, the audio, or you can click the link to subscribe to the YouTube podcast. One is better if you're jogging on the treadmill or driving. The other is a little better if you do not have to be doing anything like that. I'll let you sort that out. But without further ado, please give it up for our guest. Coming back is Mr. Michael Graves. Grammy-winning mastering engineer Michael Graves.
That has to always be said before my name.
Yes. And if you want to see a real Grammy, you got to go back to last week's episode, or go to the multimedianinja.com and look in the show notes where we just might have a picture of that. So anyway, I promised last week we would get into some music, which we shall. Right. But we were also talking some tech stuff, and I wanted to. We were talking during the break there about some differences. Well, let me set it up this way. You do a lot of original, new recording, mastering for projects. You also
traditional mastering.
Yes, there we go. That's what I needed, and as well as more audio restoration mastering. What's the difference in your process and involvement in that kind of those two things?
I think for regular traditional mastering, there's always you find a lot of mastering engineers who do some audio restoration because sometimes it's needed. Mm-hmm. One of our jobs is a quality control person, and if you're listening to something and there's a pop or something that shouldn't be there, we have the tools to take those out. Mm-hmm. The restoration just sort of takes that, but really runs with it in another direction.
Gotcha.
So when somebody, it depends on if it's somebody gives me a collection of records or somebody from tape. It's all different. But my job is when I get the collection, let's just say it's old 78s. My goal is to work. I put my audio restoration hat on first, and I try to clean them up as best I can to get them to the cleanest state that I can. I try to get them to the master tape sound. Mm-hmm. That hardly ever happens with 78s. You're never going to erase the fact that these things are over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. But I get them as clean as I can because it's important to get them as clean as you can, and also if there's any noise, to try to level that out as best you can, because once you start going into the mastering stage, doing EQ and compression, you'll get your EQ set at the first couple minutes of the song, and then it completely changes in the later part. You can't. That makes your job just crazy. You're chasing your tail all day long. So you want the restoration side. It's important to. I think it's important to both disciplines work very well together. When I'm restoring, I know what is needed when I start really doing the mastering. And when I'm mastering, I understand that there are some things that I probably shouldn't do because I'm going to bring up some nastiness that I had hidden before in the restoration side.
Right.
And if I have to, I can, go back and do some adjusting in the restoration phase. It goes back and forth. So they're they complement each other actually very well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean,
two different but related.
Very much so. And it's I'm sort of known as the restoration guy and work with historical recordings, but I really love working with current music. I feel like it makes me a better mastering engineer.
Sure.
The more genres of music I hear and the more eras of of music I get to hear, it's just the more I expose my ears to, the better. So I love it. Like last week I was working with a collection of recordings from Greece from 1930s, Hawaiian recordings. Hawaiian music was all the rage in Greece, so there were Hawaiian-inspired recordings in Greece, and it's fantastic music. Then I've got another client. He lives in North Carolina. He's a classical a composer, and he wanted to do an EP and say, "Can I knock this out in a week?" And I was yes. And it's such. It's really great to go from one extreme to the other, and it really resets my ears. And then, I'm going, the next thing is a project from the 70s, a rock band. So I like bouncing around like that. Keeps me on my toes.
Yeah. Speaking of Greek Hawaiian music, I think we have a clip we can.
I think I brought one.
We can prepare. What's the setup on this one?
Okay, I wish I knew the exact date, but this is actually it hasn't even been sent off yet. It was just approved, so I'm thinking it's from probably early 1930s. But
Gotcha.
But sort of like what I said, Greek Hawaiian music. Actually, Hawaiian music was really popular in a lot of parts of the world. It spread around, and in Greece. And when if you're familiar with early Greece music, there's a lot of similarities with the stringed instruments and the way they slide back and forth. But it was, I don't know, it's really popular.
Gotcha. And since it hadn't been sent out yet, hopefully YouTube won't bug me about the rights on this one. But anyway, the title is?
I'm not even going to try to say it.
Okay. And it's called I'm Not Even Going to Try and Say It. And here's a little clip from it. I know you're going to enjoy it. Was pretty cool. So let me ask, do you have a particular sound? And when I say that, I mean, would you say like I think I'm less brittle than other people, or I kind of like things bright or transparent, or probably everybody says transparent. But is there anything that characterizes your approach, especially given the type of things that form a lot of your restoration?
I think so. I try to go for more of a warm sound. I try to avoid brittle. I want it to be clear and focus, but I also really want to have a warm side to it. And I think that's where really with any mastering engineer, the reason you come to a mastering engineer, one of the reasons is for that person's perspective. You're basically paying them for their opinion on how something should sound. I know as an artist or a producer, you might give that person direction,
right?
But ultimately, when I've gotten myself into trouble is when I'm given a project and I start thinking, I want to make this person happy and this will make this person happy. I can't do that. I've got to just do what I think needs to be done, and then take notes from there and adjust what I need to adjust.
Right.
But usually when I just trust my gut, people like it.
Right.
So that's good. So I think to having a clear internal reference of what something should sound like, and then also being able to turn the knobs to make that happen, which is in your head. That's important too.
Right. I think the Timothy P. Green record is an example of that. I'm pretty much on the warm, not brittle side at all.
Yeah.
But do you have any considerations where you got artists that people are already very familiar with them or their recordings that you're any special considerations in that case?
Yeah, not until recently, but a lot of, again, because I work with so many old recordings, a lot of these things, the 78s, I've decided to just go all out and do exactly what I think. Even if, mastering, we think about mastering engineers as only, an incremental adjustments here or there. If I need to add 10 dBs at 120 hertz, I'll do it. Because if that's what it needs it. Mm-hmm. And I realize that I might be working with something that people are familiar with, but I still go on and do it because most of these people, diehard collectors, they're not going to come with pitchforks at me. But recently I've been doing some rock records. Like I just finished a Big Star box set.
Gotcha.
Big Star has, if you don't know who they are, you don't know who they are. But if you know who they are, you really know who they are.
Gotcha.
So they're very cult following, and they're very familiar with these records. So when I listened to the master tapes, I immediately heard what I wanted to do to try to, make it sound the best it can, which is what we want to do. But I also, I really do have to keep in mind, I can't change this too much because these are records that people have listened to thousands of times. Mm-hmm. And even though it's being reissued, it's been out of print for a while, it's being reissued, you can't screw with that too much because you will get into big trouble.
Word.
Yeah.
On a related note, I maybe it's just me having demo-itis from having grown up with it, or at least become familiar as a teenager. But whatever Ian Anderson did to the Jethro Tull's Aqualung remaster is not good.
A lot of. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say. Yeah,
sometimes you get, especially the artist, if he was sort of a producer, like, I hated the original, and yet all of your fans are like, that's the record.
That happens a lot. Yeah,
you just killed it.
I don't know why they want to do that. They keep wanting to reinvent it, and it's been done already, and people like it.
Yeah,
it's different. And it's weird. You would think the artist would have the ultimate judgment call on what's good or bad, but really, I would, if the legacy artist recording has been remastered by the artist himself versus a really well-respected mastering engineer, I probably would choose the one by the mastering engineer because you need an objective set. Again, that's the first reason you go to a mastering engineer. Mm-hmm. After you're recorded and mixed, you're so familiar with that stuff. You need an objective set of ears to do what needs to be done.
Right. Now, you were telling me a lot of people think that even though you're mixing inside the box, or mastering, I should say, that a lot of people think you're doing a complete analog process. And what do you attribute that to? I
guess, like what I said, my perspective, my reference is I like a warm sound. I grew up listening to records or cassettes that I made from those records, but that was, it's weird. So I'm 46, something like that. I always forget exactly. But my high school, I graduated in 87. So I came at the end of vinyl, and I think right around graduation, CD started coming in. Mm-hmm. So I guess in maybe 90, late 80s, I switched over to CD because I was so, it's so enticing. There's no more record noise. It sounds great. Yeah. So I started buying all CDs. And there was about 3 years there I didn't listen to nothing to CDs. And then I put on an old Pink Floyd record. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds so much better.
Right.
So that really started changing the way I was thinking about how music sounds and tones and all that. But back to how I do what I do. There are a couple of plugins that I use that can sort of emulate tubes and analogness. But really, it's more about, if I didn't have any of that, I could still probably get a good tone with using an EQ. And just, manipulating that to get the sound that I want. Tamp down some of the brittleness and bring in some of the warmness. That's easier said than done.
Right.
You try to bring up some of the warmness, and all of a sudden you've got a muddy recording. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Well, just for those people that were going, wait, any chance you would give up what those plugins were?
I love, so BX Refinement is one of my favorites. It's great. It's simple to use. It's got a little knob that shows a tube, and you can get it, to where you want it. And then there's a saturation knob that and it sounds good on almost everything. I started using it. It's really to sort of take the harshness out of current digital recordings.
Mm-hmm.
But I found use for it in my restoration side. Not always, but if I have to hit a recording particularly hard, sometimes it can add in all those digital tools that I use start to add up, and there can be a sort of a harshness to it. If I put that on it, and it really just makes it
interesting
shine. Well, not shine. It makes it glow. I don't know. It makes it.
Gotcha.
I need a descriptive word that doesn't indicate that I'm using upper EQ. I want it to be
right.
It just sits there and warms your soul.
The cockles of your soul.
Yeah, right.
Does I said cockles now. Was there another one besides that one you go to, or is that pretty much the bomb?
That's my favorite one. I like the Universal Audio. I like their Manley Varimu, and I like their iteration of the Dangerous Music backs.
Yes.
I think that's made by BX actually. That's really those three. With some EQ, and I love my favorite EQ is the Fab filter. I love it. It's easy to use. It's so versatile.
And I was going to ask you anyway, what and if you have a handy photo you want to share of the studio setup, great.
I can do that.
If not, we'll imagine it.
Yep. But it's not much. I mean, I use, because it's all in the box, my most important thing is my monitors and that whole chain. So I use a Dangerous Music monitor, the mastering console, and that goes into a Macintosh amp into my B&W monitors. So I'm using passive monitors. I'm not using powered monitors. I've also got a big sub. I'd like to have bigger speakers. You know, it's funny how I master in the box. It started off as purely economical. Starting off, again, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing to begin with. I didn't know if this was going to work anything. So I started off with these things that I could afford and made the sound happen in my head. I made it happen with the tools I had. And now I've gotten into my workflow. I could probably start incorporating analog pieces. But the way my workflow is now, the thought of rendering things in real time would really throw a hamper in what I'm doing. I'm not saying I never would go to analog gear, but I like what I'm doing now. My clients like what I'm doing, and I'm getting things done efficiently. And I work with some great labels, but this is mostly indie work. It's not major label money, so I need to be able to be efficient and good.
Work with on a cash basis. And now, since it was all whole episode ago, I forget what was the AD converter.
I use a Prism. ADA8XR. It's the same thing that the Library of Congress uses. It's what the Abbey Road uses. There are a lot of other great converters, but this is the one I chose.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We have a lot of stuff for show notes this week. Sis will be happy about that.
I haven't even gotten to the tools for audio restoration, but
right. And that was my question, to go with this mental picture of the studio, which maybe we'll flesh out with a photo in the show notes. But what other hardware and software? Well, mainly we're on the software now.
Yeah, the hardware. The hardware. I can give you some pictures of the hardware. Is mostly the playback devices. So I've got some reel-to-reel converters. I've got several cassette recorders. I've got the turntable, some other weird analog pieces. But in the computer, once it's digitized, my restoration tools really, I don't know if it's an order of importance or not because they're all important, but my main workstation is Steinberg's Wavelab. I love it. I consider it as much equally important for my mastering as it is for the restoration. It does a lot of great restoration functionality to it. And because I'm living in there pretty much all day long mastering, it's just great to switch over to doing some restoration things. So for the plugins, Cedar's always made the best. It's super expensive. And it's not always the best, but it does things that nothing else can do. My next favorite would be Isotope RX Advanced. They do great tools for noise reduction. A lot of times when I'm combine the RX with Cedar, the magic happens. Because as good, Isotope really is great for the money. It's great. I think it's like $1,000 for the advanced, and it's, in my opinion, it's far above anything else that you can get out there for that money. When you start getting to Cedar, we're talking like $6,000 per module. And they're deceptively simple. There's a dial, one dial,
Right.
turn it up or down. But just take declicking, for example. The isotope declicker is great, but when you combine it with the cedar, it's amazing. It gets as much stuff out as you possibly can without doing damage to the sound.
Sure.
And that's again when the balance is, when you start working with audio restoration, it's very intoxicating. You start moving these sliders up, and all of a sudden the noise goes away, and you keep moving them up and up, and you're like, there's no more noise. And then like a few days later, you realize, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's
I've
horrible.
completely smeared the whole thing. It's ruined. So there's always this balance of what can you take out without messing up the sound. And a lot of times the answer to that is you're going to have to leave some noise in. So that's where I love WaveLab, and Isotope has this also, but maybe I'm just used to WaveLab. They have a spectrum editor. Everybody has a spectrum editor now, but I really like working in it. And that's where I go through and I get just really super granular with a recording. And I take out all of the noises that my previous plugins didn't get out. But what's great about having the Isotope and the Cedar together is that it gets me to a place that the manual removal of noise is so much easier than if I just had one or the other or use something different. It's all about minimizing that time of me manually removing clicks.
Yes. So you use those within WaveLab or
plugins. And I know sometimes I might have to bust out the RX thing itself. There's a couple of features that I have to use, usually for tape things. Tape has its own set of anomalies to deal with.
Right.
But usually I use them as plugins.
Gotcha. And so just to drill down one thing you mentioned, would you, in some cases, say use a declicker in Isotope and Cedar on the same case?
So Cedar's a plugin. So like say, I won't even go into how WaveLab is lined up, but you can basically, in WaveLab, you can line up 20 tracks on a timeline. And each they call them clips. Each clip, you can add its own effects to it.
Clip effects,
right. So I'll put in I usually do an EQ to sort of roll off the bottom end because most of that is just rumble anyway. There's nothing there. Then I'll put in Isotope declick, and I'll get it to where I like it. Then I'll put in a Cedar declick and maybe a Cedar decrackle. And then here's the beautiful thing about 78s is that they're mono. So I've got the left and the right are the same thing. And there's I've got three choices. After I've done taken all the noise out, I've got then a choice. I can either choose the left channel or the right channel or sum them both together. And there's never a right answer. Usually if you sum them both together, there's some noise reduction that happens. That's just a bonus. That's great. You would think you would get serious noise cancellation and then you would just completely ruin, it would go away, but it's not. You just really the noise cancels more than anything else.
Right.
So that's my chain. Is I have the declickers, and then I have this little thing that I can switch to either left channel, right channel, or merge the two, and that's how I render that into the files that I then go in and manually remove stuff.
Right. I hadn't even thought about it that if you've got the stereo turntable and stylus, so when you're digitizing a mono 78 or old record, you're getting actually the left and right sides of the groove recorded into your stereo channel.
And it's deceiving too, because when you listen to that, you really have to listen to these old 78s or any old mono recording with sort of an educated ear, because let's say you're listening to something now from 1930, an old 78 on a stereo, left and right speakers. It's mono. The content is mono. Stereo is not a thing. But you're hearing a spatial effect, and that's just noise.
Right.
Now, our modern ears find that pleasing because it does. It gives us a sense of stereo. It has no place there. So when I take it mono, and if someone is listening in my studio with me, they immediately think, "Oh, you collapsed it." No, I didn't. The content, the music is there. Let's go back and listen to the stereo. Listen intently. Listen to the music. It's in the center.
Right.
There's nothing happening in the sides except for noise. And then I can isolate what I'm taking out, and you can hear it is pure noise. But we find that pleasant.
Right.
But my goal is to get as close to the performance as possible.
Right.
And so and eliminate the defects of the media.
Right. I like it. I had most of this I had not contemplated whatsoever.
So one thing further about that, when I talked earlier in the last episode about getting different file formats or getting MP3s or getting, one of the things that really hinders me the most is when somebody will send me a mono file, just a mono, non-interleaved one mono file of a 78, and they've taken away so much of what I can do without having that left and right to choose from.
Wow. I had not thought of that at all. That's worthy of a sound effect. So if we've been in the weeds for a minute, let's have a listen to some musical samples.
All right.
And I know I have a very interest in the Caribbean, of course, and hopefully going to sail to Cuba soon, but which I mistakenly attributed as the country of this next thing. But I don't know how soon I'll be going to Haiti, but do you have a record from there and a track? I'll let you tee that up.
It's a compilation from a new label. This is actually his first project. It's the label is called Ostinato Records.
And for people on the video channel, do we have a?
Let's see.
We have it right here. If you're listening to the audio podcast, just imagine a lovely cover design there. Awesome.
Okay, it is voodoo jazz, merengue, 1960 to 1981 Haiti, electric folklore. Again, the music in the Caribbean and South America is so rich and so there's so much happening and so many different cross mingling of music. I love it all. I'm working on a compilation now of Brazilian music, and it's off in the countryside. It's not the typical stuff you would hear. Amazing.
Right.
This, there's not a bad song on here. We could pick one. Let's do, I don't know, Samba Punches No. 2. It's great, really cool guitar, fuzz guitar. It sounds like surf rock almost, but Latin sounding.
Okay.
Then it goes into, it's a great tune.
So I'll have this link in the show notes, but also this will be Samba Punches No. 2.
That's it.
Roll 'em. Well, that was very cool.
That was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, awesome. And I believe you have, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but I believe you have one more sample.
Let's do it.
From the good folks at Dust to Digital.
Yes. So this one was, we were actually nominated for this last year. Really great collection. If your listeners are familiar with Alan Lomax, he was a field recordist, a very well-known field recordist. What that means is non-professional studio recordings. This guy would go out and try to capture folk songs, any non-professional singers. Try to capture these little snapshots of America.
Right.
And these are a collection of recordings he made at a prison work farm called, a notorious prison work farm, Parchment Penitentiary in Mississippi. Horrible, deplorable conditions, prison chain gangs, and these are these are guys who, the work songs were so important to them for a number of reasons. One, it helps you get through the day. At this grueling day, they would work from can't to can't, work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. Just doing grueling labor. Obviously, the cadence of the songs helped them, just sort of get through it. Mm-hmm. But also, when they found that the reason work songs were so important, one of the reasons they were so important, is that if somebody fell behind, they would be singled out by the person in charge and either be whipped, beat up, whatever. Nasty things would happen. If you have a song and everybody's working at the same, nobody's gonna fall behind. So it's all it makes you one cohesive group.
Yeah,
it's a way to protect the whole group of people.
I like that.
Yeah. Here's what I like about this one. One, what I just said. It's from this horrible condition comes this amazing music.
Sure.
But when I got the recordings were great. So Alan would record this stuff. There were 2 sets of recordings, and these were later, I want to think in the later 50s. And Alan, he got great recordings. But it seemed to me when I first heard them, goes back to what I said about having a clear idea of what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And what I did to this might be a lot of people have, I think it's important to have reverence for some of these recordings.
Right. Because
they are important. You don't want to screw with them too much, but you also, let me go back. These are men hitting axes on a chain gang. Mm-hmm. I wanted you to feel it.
Right.
The recording, it was there. All I had to do was boost some certain frequencies, and you can feel it in your chest. It doesn't make it muddy. It just puts you right in that moment.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to do. Like I said, I turned some knobs along a big way. Mm-hmm. But I think it sounds good. I've heard good feedback from it. So another great recording, great performance.
Awesome. So this song is called?
I don't remember. I think it's Berta.
Yes, I remember seeing that file name. Yeah. So here's a clip from Berta, and we'll have the link in the show notes.
Never do wrong, you never do wrong. Do what I tell you, gal. You never do wrong, you never do wrong. Stay with your mom and tell her I come home. Stay with your mom and tell her I come home. Lord, Lord, yeah.
Wow,
pretty,
man,
yeah.
that was powerful.
It's heavy.
Yeah. So, man, that we definitely get that in the show notes, so you can check out the whole thing.
Yep.
And
it's on iTunes. But I tell you what, all this stuff is, I think, it's on iTunes. But what's cool about the labels that I work with, for the most part, is they make amazing packaging.
Yes, they do.
And I think it's an interesting way to combat downloading, illegal downloading, is that you can get this music. I think pretty much everything we talked about, you could probably go get it on a torrent somewhere, but you're not going to get this.
Right.
The liner notes, they give you perspective on everything, and it's just a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah, this packaging is amazing. Yeah. On the LPs and the music of Morocco. I may, even though I don't actually listen to CDs, I may have to get that one just for the package.
Yeah, right.
Well, I shan't detain you anymore today, but I really appreciate you coming to join us, sir.
My pleasure.
Coming back to join us, no less.
Yeah.
And I will look forward to hopefully seeing you at another event this week. We'll give or take. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen of the virtual studio audience, please give a special thank you to Mr. Michael Graves. And we'll have you back soon, sir.
Cool. Anytime.
Well, that just about wraps up another edition of the Multimedia Ninja Podcast. I hope you'll come back next week and bring your friends. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast and find all things Multimedia Ninja, including show notes and pictures of Michael's studio and links to all them records and softwares and all kind of stuff at themultimedianinja.com. I hope you have a great week. Do some creative work. And we'll see you next time.